Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming to the 2025 Marshall State of Agriculture panel. For those that do not know me, my name is Brad Gerhardt, President of your Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce. Really quick before we get to our sponsors, I do want to let you know if you do need to use the restrooms, over in the grandstand, those bathrooms are open. We have a number of sponsors I'd like to thank today. Ag Plus, First Independent Bank, AURI, Legal Estate Planning Solutions, MVTV Wireless, Olson Organics, ADM, Invenergy Wind Development, Kibble Equipment, Ralco, and NextEra Energy. Thank you all once again for sponsoring. I do want to recognize a couple of our elected officials today. We have Lyon County Commissioner Rick Anderson and State Senator Gary Dames. Thanks for being here. This is our 8th year holding this panel. And if you might remember, for those that were at the first couple, we were at the Marshall-Lyon County Library. Do you guys prefer the indoors or the outdoors? You can tell me later. Agriculture is truly the lifeblood of a community like Marshall. When agriculture does well, the economy does well. It's important for related businesses, farm-related businesses and business in general, to hear from the panelists that come from different ag backgrounds like we have here today. Our facilitator this year is a familiar face, Carolyn Olson. She's with Olson Organics. Carolyn has been a regular on the panel, but this year she makes the move to the facilitator. Carolyn grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis and joined her husband, where's John at? Right there. And Sydney, right there, the son. Once husband on a farm in 1988. Once there, she quickly learned the ropes, preferring spring and fall tillage, as well as running the combine. As an organic crop farmer from southwest Minnesota, Carolyn has served in many policy development and leadership roles on a local, state, and national level. Carolyn has a passion for bringing together all types of farmers to secure a better future for all agriculture. And as you've heard the last couple of years, if you've been here, Carolyn also makes a delicious cinnamon roll. Just ask her for her recipe. Thank you, Carolyn, for facilitating today's panel. I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
Well, thank you, Brad. And also, thank you all for attending. We realize, and I get to say we because I was able to help Brad and his staff plan today. We appreciate your time that you take to attend this event. We try and we will be trying to bring you information that will be useful to you, whether you are in production agriculture, if you are a farmer, if you are a lender, if you are in insurance, whatever your role, equipment sales, feed sales, whatever. I could go on for about an hour and list all of the supporting roles that we have in agriculture, but we won't. So the other thing, I just would like to comment that I am so excited, and I asked if I could facilitate the panel today because I have connections to all 3 of the organizations that are represented today. In my role as the Farm Bureau Vice President, I have the opportunity to sit on other boards that have a Farm Bureau seat. So I sit on the board for the Center for Rural Policy and Development. I have worked with Green Seam in different aspects, and I use their data for a lot of different things in my roles on other boards as well. And Jonathan, before we got married in 1987, Jonathan was at the time it was Wilmer Votech. He started with Farm Business Management, and we have been a part of that ever since. So long history with Farm Business Management and understanding the importance of all of these organizations that are here today. So I am pretty excited that all of you agreed to be here today. So right next to me is Julie Tesh, who is the rock star of the Center for Rural Policy and Development. After 25 years of living in urban areas, Julie decided it was time to return to her roots in rural America. Julie became the president and CEO in 2018 after working in Washington, D.C. as the executive director of the American Farm Bureau Foundation for Agriculture. And being in Farm Bureau and active in that, I was able to work with Julie when she was at the American Farm Bureau as well. So we kind of go back. She has been involved in nonprofit management and supporting the rural lifestyle her entire career through her work with the National FFA Alumni Association and the Minnesota Agricultural Education Leadership Council. She is a proud graduate of the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where she received her bachelor's degree in applied economics and her master's of education in agricultural education. At the center, Julie is the chief relationship builder, and I can vouch for that. She's super good at that. She manages a board of 19 members, oversees the overall management of the center, and is the Pied Piper of living in rural Minnesota. Outside of work, she enjoys volunteering for 4-H and FFA activities, discovering her family history through genealogy, and traveling the world and discovering craft breweries and wineries across Minnesota. And I wasn't kidding when I said, ask me for my recipe for my rolls. I actually shared that with Julie, and she made rolls for the Waseca County Fair, and she did pretty well. Yeah.
Grand champion.
So next we have Sam Ziegler from Green Seam. Sam has a passion for all things related to agriculture. Being part of providing food, feed, fuel, and fiber to families in our area, to families abroad, is such an amazing profession to be part of. In this position, Ziegler works with key ag stakeholders, building coalitions along with developing and executing key strategic initiatives that are essential components to realize the aspirations of Green Seam. Sam spent nearly 10 years with the Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council and Minnesota Soybean Growers Association, and is a fourth-generation partner and operator in Ziegler Farms, located near Good Thunder. Sam enjoys being a father and husband, and for fun, he likes playing baseball, hanging at the lake, or hunting. And Sam is also an alum of Marl, so you notice his Marl pin. And Sam and I see each other at a lot of events. So on the end, we have Chase Van Koolen from Minnesota West Technical College. He is a farm business management instructor. Chase grew up on a family farm north of Marshall. He is currently active in the operation, growing corn and soybeans and custom finishing hogs. Chase lives on the farm with his wife, Kia, and their white lab, Dash. He is currently a farm business management instructor for Minnesota West Community and Technical College. Chase also serves as the treasurer of the Lyon County Corn and Soybean Growers Association. And I haven't had a chance to work much with Chase yet, but I know he's pretty new at farm business management, but with our involvement in that organization too, I look forward to a lot more opportunities for us to work together. But let's welcome our panelists. And I'm going to try really hard to keep us on time. So, all three of these organizations, you all release annual reports, and all of them, they will tell you how to access those reports at the end. From Green Seam, I believe there is a shortened version that you have access to. But I'd like you, as you further introduce yourselves and your organizations, I'd like you to talk about one or two trends or data points that were surprising or that you feel is important for this group to hear. And you can go in any order you would like.
I'll start. I will say you get Sam and I going, and you might be here a long time, so we'll try and be short and to the point. But thank you for the invitation today. Wonderful to be here. I live on my family's corn and soybean farm just east of the metropolis of Waldorf, Minnesota, which I saw Midwest Bank. I am a Midwest Bank customer. Awesome. But I'm in rural Waseca County, and so it's wonderful being here. So thank you for the invitation. I would say one trend with the Center for Rural Policy and Development, we look at all of rural living in Minnesota. So we don't necessarily do research on agriculture, but we look at healthcare, we look at housing, we look at workforce. And the one trend that I would say overall, and it's not, here's the thing, it's not surprising. A lot of the research that we look at, it's not surprising, but we're able to put the numbers behind it. So when we say rural areas are, here, I just had to write it down, rural areas are having more deaths than births due to an aging population. Not surprising, right? But it's really starting to gain steam in rural. We're just not having the babies that we've had in the past. I have a cat. I do not have children, so I fall into that. But you're starting to see that more, and our baby boomers obviously are aging. They are living longer, but they're aging, and we're just not filling that gap. And so when we talk about, oh, there's no people, we're not even able to replenish ourselves. And so looking at how we're going to do that, that is one thing that we've really been trying to tell people, like, we are not able in rural to sustain our population. So what are we going to do to attract people to our communities?
That's a good point. That's a very good point. For those of you who don't know Green Seam, we focus on economic development around food and ag, and we focus on southern Minnesota, southwest Minnesota, primarily as we are this hub of solution-based companies when it comes to food and ag. We already are this natural hub. If you think of Silicon Valley, they're a natural hub in technology, and you hear all those other things. Well, we're already that here, but we're in a larger region than one valley or one street or one county. And so we look at it that way of how do we grow our region? We'll focus on what our strengths are. Focus on food and ag and the supply chain and those missing key sectors of that. And so when we looked at first doing a report, I think it's 6 years we've done this now, it was based upon, you have USDA, they cover really good data when it comes to farm production and entities and what the growth is and how many people are involved and those things. You have Department of Employment Economic Development through payroll data that talks about general, and most of the time you hear about non-farm payroll, right? Because when they started those things, it was, well over 3/4 of the population were involved in production. And now, it's down to a very small portion. So there's those couple reports out there, but there was a lot of data missing of how do we look at the ecosystem of our state, and how do we look at what are the challenges, what are the impacts when it comes to what we see as food and ag. And we see, well, all of you in here are related to food and ag, or you wouldn't be here, and there's a lot of others. And Carolyn started off really well by kind of saying, all these industries that are connected. So we try to get a pulse on the economy, and this one is a statewide report, that anybody that sees themselves connected to food and ag, and capture that data and that snapshot in time. And so each year we start that survey and focus groups about January 1, and we're done by middle of February. So that's kind of the window of time each year, that the data that we're talking about.
Yeah, as a farm business management instructor, we're really working with farmers across the state. We help them with their financial records, their accounting records, and we do a whole farm analysis on all the farms we work with. So that's our annual report right here. We put it together in a book, and it's over about 1,500 farms across the state. And kind of one of the big trends that may or may not be surprising, depending on what industry you're in. From 2021, the median net farm income was $176,000, and in 2024, the median net farm income is down to $12,000. That's a drop of 80% since then. And really, that's due to a lot of different factors, but mainly grain prices have been coming down and inputs really have not followed down. They're staying at the same levels or they're even increasing. And it's really just hitting farms pretty tough because that $12,000 that they have left, they still have to pay their family living, their debt payments, any capital purchases. That still has to come out of there. So that's where farms are really starting to struggle. And that's the trend. As of right now, there's not really any light at the end of the tunnel. So that's kind of where we're sitting at right now.
Awesome. Chase, that kind of goes into my first question. And I do have a couple questions for each of our panelists, but if you think of something or if something that they say kind of sparks a question in your mind, we will have an opportunity for you to ask questions as well. and we encourage that. So, but Chase, what impact do farmers have on their local economy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, obviously, everybody knows in this area that farms have a huge impact on their economy, but across the state, it's just ridiculous how big of an impact they have. Out of the 1,500 farms that we surveyed, the average farmer spent $1.2 million in their local economy this year. So take that over a 40-year farming career, every farmer is going to put roughly $50 million back into their local economy. And that's just the direct dollars that they're spending on inputs, machinery, whatever it may be. That's not even how many jobs are they supporting, what else are they adding to the community on top of that financial resource. And we need this, we need all the farms in our communities because a lot of small towns would not be around if farming wasn't around today.
Yeah, when Jonathan and I were at the Farm Business Management Banquet earlier this spring, that's the first thing I look for in the book is what is this year's impact? And our Farm Business Management group in Marshall broke it down, and those numbers would be available if you want to see them, but broke it down to seed, fertilizer, all of those different things. And to me, that was really eye-opening. And I know I've probably said this before if you've attended others of these. Jonathan and I, when our farm was reaching the century mark and we were going to have a party, we sat down and we started on a road trip where you're not doing much else. We started making a list of all the people that have had an impact on our farm, whether it was seed or, feed or, anything. The co-op delivering diesel or whatever. We stopped at 600 people, and we could have gone on further. And that's what those numbers are talking about. And as Chase said, that's not counting, those numbers are not counting jobs, but Jonathan and I were counting the people in there. 600, that is, bigger than some of our small communities in the area. So that to me is a number I always look for. But along with that, you talk about there's 1,500 farms in the Farm Business Management Program. What is the value of that? How are farmers that are, how are we able to separate those that are more profitable from those that are less profitable?
Yeah, so like I said, we do a farm analysis every year on all the we try and do it on all the farms, but some of the farms we can't get all the information that we need on it. But we take all that information, put it in this database, and then we can start to do a comparison benchmark. We can say, okay, these are the top 20% farms in this category, and these are the bottom 20%. We can start to look, okay, what are they doing differently? And it might seem like, okay, it should be pretty obvious. It should be, okay, these guys have off-farm incomes. They're keeping their cost of family living low. They have low debt. Maybe their capital purchases are in line. And all that definitely does help with the farm profitability. I'm not saying it does. You have to watch those things. But the bigger picture is you have to know your numbers. If you don't know what it costs to produce a bushel of corn, you don't know what you need to market it for. That's where we can come in. We can break down all your costs. We help you figure out what those numbers actually are. And it does make a difference because you might think, oh, the top 20% of our farms, those have to be the huge farmers that are farming all kinds of acres, have all kinds of livestock. That's not the case. Between the top 20% of the farms and the bottom 20% of the farms, the difference in acres is about 20 acres. So it doesn't matter if you're farming 300 acres or 2,000 acres. If you're losing money on those 2,000 acres, you're making less money than the guy that's farming 300 acres. So that's where we can come in and we can help. We can figure out what your cost production is. We can say, hey, maybe this decision makes sense, maybe it doesn't. Maybe we should wait a couple years. Maybe we need to build up that working capital and get back into a spot where we can afford that purchase. If you don't know your numbers, you're just guessing, and that's where you can really get into trouble. And usually by the time you're talking to us, if it's your banker or FSA that's telling you need to talk to us, you're probably already in a lot of financial trouble that it's not too late. We can still help you. We can still try and get you out of this. But you should have been thinking about these numbers a long time ago.
I know for us, knowing the benchmarks has been important in helping us to drive decisions. And, as a farmer, it's not always easy to know what your numbers are. And where do we need to chase different markets? Do we need to do something different to be more profitable? And I do see that a lot of farmers in our area, they are doing different things to be more profitable. Now, all of the bankers out there, show of hands, how many of you really, really, really like when your farmer comes in and shows you their farm business management numbers? Yeah, there's quite a few of them. So that's another advantage that we have seen with knowing your numbers is it takes a little bit of the stress out when you're having to go talk to your banker at the beginning of the year when you're making some of your decisions. Moving on to Sam, we've heard about kind of some of the, knowing our debt levels, and we know that there's been challenges in profitability, hearing Chase's numbers. That's on the farming side, but what about the small businesses, the rural businesses that your report has talked about? What is the health of the businesses that did take part in your survey?
So there's two parts of our overall report. One part is focus groups and one part's a survey. So the qualitative side, right, is getting to talk to somebody versus the quantitative that we can measure. And so the focus groups this year, there's human capital continues to come up. It's came up for the past 3 years as really the top area. This year in the survey part this year, input prices kind of came up to be the top. Is they just keep moving up, and how much can you charge then your customer, or from a farmer standpoint, can we get more for that grain or produce more bushels, right? But human capital continues to be in that top area and it really ties back to what Julie was talking about, is when you look at your area, your community, how many births versus how many deaths, how many outward migration, how much inward migration, but it gets down to, is there folks available to do the jobs that we need done, because automation and AI and all those things don't replace at the same level. And so that gets a lot of talk, but then it morphs into, when you talk about human capital, what's holding it up? Why don't we have these folks? Is it childcare? Is it high-speed internet access to your area? Is it housing? And what type of housing? It kind of continually morphs into those components. So those that are hiring people and have a team, and not just your own capital or your own human capital, those are pretty key components there, as well as when you start jumping into maybe what's holding businesses back from growth. Sure, the businesses are connected to production. Our production is, a lot has to do with the weather and the commodity prices that we don't always control. And so they're seeing a definite ripple effect to this past year and going into this year of the uncertainty of, is anybody going to want to buy a new tractor? Does AGCO and Jackson need to produce anymore? Right, et cetera, et cetera. And people weren't making decisions. If you look back to this kind of time frame of this report of January into February, a lot of people holding back saying, I don't know if I'm going to do a project this year. I don't know if I'm going to expand whatever business it's going to be. And so that uncertainty and really was prevalent and clear in the conversation this year, that people wanted to grow, but they're just a little unsure if now is the right time. And I think you can all kind of reflect on your customers or yourselves. If it feels like we're still in that little bit of holding pattern, that people are doing well overall, but not sure if we should make that extra decision. The report that handed out, I didn't bring enough copies for everybody. It's a condensed version of the report, and on the very back of it, I put the website that you can find the full report on. So take a picture if you don't have one, or go to the Green Seam website, State of Ag. It'll come up, and all years are up there. So the past 6 years, they'll be all available.
One aspect of technology, because we've talked about technology on this panel for a few years and what that means for farmers in agriculture. We've talked about broadband, we've talked about some of those things, but one little aspect in your report kind of caught my eye, and that is cybersecurity. That's not something that we talk about a lot here. What should farmers and rural businesses be paying attention to when it comes to cybersecurity?
So this is interesting. It's a new question for us in the survey. Our survey gets generated through our committees and through others that were like, what's not being asked? What can we understand? And we asked about how people are using technology. And there's a variety of things that they could choose, or all of them, and those components. The one thing that really we didn't realize till we got the data back and then started looking into it a little bit more. If you look at the U.S. economy on a whole, every year, the estimation is about $1.6 trillion of cyber security costs each year, which has been a 20% increase year over year. And then you looked at the data, and it was a third, basically. A third of companies said that it's something that they're investing in, that's important to them. And so it kind of made us step back and go, what does this mean? Now, I don't know what it means to each one of you as businesses and companies out there, but from us looking at the data, it's kind of like there's a gap here. That 20% increase in this issue, this cost to our industries, or industry as a whole, but yet 2/3 of us are just kind of ignoring it. And not finding it as a priority. So if that continues at that level, 20% year over year increase, it doesn't take very many years to realize how much it affects our overall economy, and at some point it's going to affect us individually or locally. And we don't have to go back that many years ago where almost in the same calendar year we had Crystal Valley Co-op, AGCO, JBS, there's another co-op right in the northern part of Iowa. They were all hit with it and jammed up for how many days, right? So it's here, it's real, but that's a new data point. There's some other technology, components in there of what companies are looking at that I think are like, wow, that's kind of, that's interesting too. But that's just one of those points that we pulled out of there.
Awesome, thank you. And I know, we think of cybersecurity as far as like our computers, getting phishing emails, all of the annoying phishing texts that everybody gets. But how much do we think about with all the technology that we use? And even, we've had a lot of sunspot activity this spring, and we'd lose GPS signal. But what happens if there's a bigger outage? I look at some of the younger farmers that probably haven't ever had to hand steer a tractor much.
You mean being criticized by the neighbor for driving crooked?
Yeah, that judgment, we've all felt it, right? But what happens if there is a major outage on some of the technology that we're using, that we use because it helps us for the fatigue factor and for the efficiency factors? Well, that is something I think we need to be thinking about as well on, what we need to do. So that one made me kind of go, when I read that one. So thank you for that. Julie, the Center's State of Rural Report looked at domestic migration changes over the last decade in the different population types. And if you go on their website, you will see their definitions of the different population types. Lyon County is considered town and rural based on population sizes. And this kind of, Sam kind of touched on this as well. But there's been a kind of a drastic differences between some of those types, and between entirely rural, entirely urban, town, rural, urban mix, and town and rural mix. So talk about the trends and kind of what surprised you the most on that.
Yeah, so the first thing I always tell people, whether it's a presentation or anything, is know what your rural is. What is a rural definition to you? Because where I live in Freedom Township, you can't get much more rural. But I go to Mankato, that's my regional center. What is Mankato considered? Blue Earth County is considered an urban town mix county. Because to me, Mankato is huge. But to somebody in Minneapolis, where's Mankato? It's rural. You go out to Washington, D.C., you talk to people out there, where's Minnesota? You know, and so it's all about perspective. And so I always encourage people, know what your rural is, and when you're talking to somebody about rural, find out what their rural is as well, because it can change and it can drastically change. The federal government has over a dozen definitions of rural, over a dozen, and it depends upon the department. So just make sure you know who you're talking to. I will reference a report that we did here on Southwest Minnesota a couple of years ago, and on migration and where people are going. And I specifically chose Southwest Minnesota because of our neighbors to the west in South Dakota. And we seem to have a problem of people migrating over there and not coming back. And I know we hear anecdotally, oh gosh, people are fleeing, they're leaving. Well, I wanted to put numbers behind it, and we were able to do that. We worked with the Minnesota Office of Higher Education, and it is scary how much you can be tracked. So we were able to, I had to sign my life away to get data from students when they were in high school through 10 years. And we can track that. Did they stay in the state? Did they go somewhere else? If they did go somewhere else, did they come back? We can track that. And in Southwest Minnesota, the stories are true, and we can back that with data that unfortunately, if students leave a rural area, if they leave Marshall, odds are they're not going to come back. If they go out of state to South Dakota, Iowa, or North Dakota, odds are they're going to stay there. Now, the interesting thing and the good highlights is students who took career and technical education credits, so welding, shop, agriculture, FACS. If you took career and tech education classes, those students were more likely to either stay, or if they did go somewhere else, they're more likely to come back. They are tied to the community. Also, our community colleges, our community and technical colleges, if students went there and took some classes and came and went back, it is because of that. So it's those two big factors that were really good to see. I always try to find silver linings because we tend to talk about a negative rural narrative, but we have a lot of positive things going on. And so those are the two things here in Southwest Minnesota, was career and tech ed, and also community and technical colleges being tied to that, where people will come back. And I will say around the state, it really depends. It's very regional. Our research is getting more regionally based. And Southwest Minnesota, we did 2 years ago. This fall, we're releasing rest of the data for rest of the state. And it looks different. You know, on the Iron Range, it looks different than here. In southeastern Minnesota, it looks different. And so there are glimmers of hope. I will say that, unfortunately, the very rural areas are kind of a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the population. So when we talk about deaths over births, that's been happening in rural for a long time. And it's going to catch up into urban in about 10 to 15 years. But the trend starts in rural and goes from there. One quick other thing I'll say is towns like Marshall are doing well. Regional centers are doing well. People are moving more to regional centers or the adjacent areas. And so, again, depending upon what your definition of rural is, there are pockets that are doing really well.
I know part of the study, and I know this being on the Center for Rural Policy Board, we get to hear all of these first. So my kids, my three daughters were part of that study. They were within the time frame, and my three daughters went to school in South Dakota. There's one that moved back to Minnesota due to medical conditions. She's unable to have a full-time job. But two of my kids never came back to Minnesota, and it's highly unlikely that they will. And that kind of hit home a little bit for me. It's like I know what went into the decisions for my own children, but you know, there's a lot of Southwest Minnesota. There's a lot of students in this area. So also, you know, when you're sitting on your planning and zoning commissions or your town boards, and you're looking at how do you attract a workforce, there's good data that can kind of help, how do we support our SMSU, our Minnesota West, and the other community and regional colleges within our area. How do we support them to encourage students to take advantage of the education there so that we can keep them? Because we do need to keep them.
And I'll just mention one more thing is we get really down on ourselves in rural saying everyone's leaving, everyone's fleeing, 18-year-olds are all leaving. They're 18-year-olds. That's what 18-year-olds do. It's not just happening in rural, it's happening in urban. Kids in Minneapolis, St. Paul are leaving there too. So it's not just us, because a lot of times that narrative of what drives rural's dying, it is not dying. It's changing. So when you look at, we talk about the brain drain of people leaving, but there's a brain gain. So when those students then turn into adults and start having families, and they turn the ages of between 20 and 30 and 49, they're moving back. They want to have their kids in smaller schools. They want to have better housing. They want different things. So for me, I like to tell people, let's focus on what to bring them back to. Let them go. Let them explore, learn new things, and bring them back. And let's learn from them and figure that out. So don't get too down on yourselves, because 18-year-olds are going to 18-year-old, That's just what they do.
That is very true. I moved out here from the Twin Cities Metro, so I was part of the out-migration from the urban area into a town rural area. And I wouldn't go back because I love it out here. So you find your thing, you find where you fit, and that's kind of common, I think, with the 18-year-olds, is they want to find where they fit. And you just hope that they decide to come back home when they get to that next stage of life. So, talking about the in-migration, out-migration, and that we're not keeping up with our populations with, the birth and the death, that makes in-migration that much more important. Are we seeing trends on communities that are doing different things to try and attract that in-migration? Or what do you think is driving the different regions to being able to attract people from not just other states, other countries, but other parts of our state?
Number one, I'll say that having good internet is number one. It should be treated like a utility. Where I live on our farm, someday we will have fiber to the farm. It's supposed to be this summer, now it's next summer. I don't know when, but everybody that I work with will be really happy when it is, because I freeze up all the time. But that's number one. You're finding where people have reliable internet, people are moving there more. Number two, I would say, look at Otter Tail County. North central Minnesota, or west central Minnesota. Otter Tail County is doing a phenomenal job of marketing themselves and their community. They have a little hand puppet otter that is the cheesiest thing you'll ever see, but you see this thing all over social media. They are attacking social media. They are an NIL sponsor with the University of Minnesota Gophers. They have the football team, several of them go out to Detroit Lakes and go ice fishing. They go and do those things. These communities are really promoting themselves. And that's what you need to start doing is, we're just a little old town. No, promote it. Do something kitschy, do something fun, get noticed. It's marketing, because that's what people are paying attention to. So that's where you're seeing migration. So Otter Tail County is doing really, really well. And they are they're focused on it. And so that is one thing. There's other places around the state too, but I specifically think of Otter Tail County. Now, obviously they have lakes to their advantage, but they're getting more people there than they ever anticipated.
I just want to add on to that a little bit. If you look at the globe, migration to mega cities has been prevalent, okay? It wasn't that many years ago. I don't even think we have to go back to 2015, where the globe on a whole moved from an agrarian, rural society to an urban society on a globe. First time ever in history as we know it. And so it's not just us here. It's not just us in Midwestern U.S. This is happening in Asia. This is happening in Europe. This is happening in other places. The place that's going to win is the ones that are doing something about it. And that was part of why Green Seam was created. We see the trends. In Green Seam region across southern Minnesota, we dip in a little of northern Iowa, we lose about 1,000 workers a year. And part of our goal was how do we just stop that? Not necessarily attract 1,000 more, but how do we just stop losing 1,000 a year, right? And so, but the only way to do it, it's we all have to be working together. And one of these little solution components that, okay, you don't have a marketing budget, you're not a marketer, your community doesn't want to do what Otter Tail is, but how about encouraging your youth to go away, but encouraging them to come back? And that you as a business, maybe not hiring today, but you look at that graduate and say, hey, if you ever think about returning back, come and find me. Here's my number, right? And in some regards, that's the brain gain side of things. That there's a really cool report by University of Minnesota Extension talking about reframing this, which a little bit Julie was talking about, is we're not in the middle of nowhere. We're in the middle of everywhere. You can get to a lot of places in a certain amount of time, and yet you have a safe, place where you don't have to lock your doors every night. You have great schools. You have, access to these different amenities that they don't in these other communities and cities. But part of it's trying to just tell that graduate, when you're ready to come back, and maybe they're 49 years old, make sure you welcome them and don't say, oh, what are you doing back? So think about it a little bit differently, that they know there's a door open, because that's sometimes what we're hearing from some data is they don't feel welcome back.
I know there are some that on the welcome back part, and Chase, I look at you as being one of that younger set. It's hard to go back to your own community and feel like you're being treated as an adult. Have you felt that at all, or have you been welcomed back? I'm just kind of curious. This just popped into my head.
I guess I would say most people here probably know who my mom is. So that's a little bit different situation maybe, because I grew up knowing a lot of people in Marshall. So I feel like I was welcomed back in the community right away. But that was also because I started at Midwest Bank right when I came out of college, and I was at events like these. I was out in the community. I was doing different things. I wasn't just going to my job, going home, and not doing anything in the community. Because those are the people that I feel like aren't welcomed in the community because they're not out. They don't know people in the community. They're not doing stuff like this. So I'd say that's why they don't maybe feel like they're a part of the community.
That's an awesome point, being involved. And I think, whether you are moving to a community for the first time, you've been a part of a community for a very long time, getting involved, coming to events like this, being part of your chamber, being part of your town organizations, Lions Club or whatever. Those are also organizations that have said, oh, there's nobody that wants to do anything anymore. But I think maybe we've lost the perspective that getting involved is where we find where we belong. So thank you for that. So before we wrap up, do we have any questions from the audience? Brad will bring a microphone around. Any questions from the audience? I know it's hot, and I know we just ate, and I know you've been listening to, data interpretation, which, can be a really bad setup. So here's your opportunity to stand up, to stretch, to exercise your brain a little bit more, and ask a question. We'd love to have one from the floor.
While
once.
you're thinking
Okay.
about a question, I will say I haven't mentioned yet our website, ruralmn.org. And you can go there. All of our research is free. All of our reports are free for you to use. We also have a YouTube channel. We typically do a webinar with each of our reports. So you're able to go on YouTube, watch, listen, however you like. But what I know Carolyn uses quite a bit on our website is our atlas. We are able to, every year we update it with our state of rural, and it's, again, free for you all to use, but you can go on there and you can hone down into your county, into your city, and see different rates. How many people are on free and reduced lunch? How many people What's the average wage? What's this? What's that? But it's specifically for Minnesota. So if you're ever curious, just go to our website, ruralmn.org, and look at the atlas, and you can really narrow down in there and see specifically, and you can also compare yourselves to others. So encourage you to look at that. And I know data is not fun and sexy. If you would have told me I'd be running a research organization 10 years ago, I'd have said, you're crazy. But without good data, Sam and I talk about this all the time, without good data, there is not good policy. Good policy is made from relevant and good data. And I really think that's where people need to be investing in instead of saying, what's research? This doesn't matter. All of this matters.
And I am not a numbers person. My husband will tell you that. I am not a numbers person, but I love data. And I love looking at all three of the reports and looking at where I can find use for everything that they offer. So for me, not being a data or a numbers person, I kind of nerd out over all of these reports in a weird way. And that's why I appreciate, they do similar things, but they're all different. You can find different things at each of their websites. So no takers on questions? Oh, awesome.
Brad Slusher, Southwest Minnesota State University. I support the Minnesota Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Carolyn. Both alumni in the program. You speak about involvement. So here's my question for each one of you. Think back a time when you were invited to get involved and you were pretty, I don't really know if I really want to do this, but what did you learn from that involvement and how has it made you better? So think about some time you were invited to become involved and how is the world better as a result of your decision? Please.
Sure, Brad. I'll start. So I left our farm in 1992 and went to the University of Minnesota, lived in the Twin Cities, Indianapolis, DC, the whole 9 yards. I figured I would come back to rural when I retired. And life happens, we end up back here. And I will say everywhere that I lived, I basically enjoyed, but it wasn't until I got involved that I really felt connected. And when I came back to Waldorf and to the farm, you ask about people treating you as an adult. When you're going to church with your first grade teacher, it's kind of difficult. But, you work on that. But one thing I'll say, Brad, is I was invited to join Rotary. And I live in the country. The town closest to me is Waldorf. We don't have Rotary. We don't have that. But Waseca does. And I was surprised that they asked me to join because we're a virtual organization. But they're trying really hard to become a Waseca County Rotary because there's no other Rotaries in the county. And so I thought about it. I'm like, great, another thing I can be a part of. I tend to say no, not often. But I really had to think about it because I know it's a commitment. And I'm really glad that I did because I'm able to meet so many more people in the Waseca County area. People have changed over time. I hadn't been back in 25 years. So it's been really beneficial to be able to connect with those people. And also for our work, I have people I can talk to like, hey, are you seeing this trend? Are you seeing that trend? Or what questions do you have? And so joining Rotary it was very surprising to be asked, but it's been very intentional for me as well.
I got two different ones I'll just mention. For those of you out there, raise your hand if you're on the local cemetery board. Okay, there's one of you, so you know what I'm talking about. Delegated by parents to help out. But there is a unique perspective. Easy to say no. Marking gravestones out and things is not something on my bucket list ever. But when a family has a loss and they are looking where to go, it's been interesting and somewhat rewarding that, hey, here's our process and yeah, we'll make it happen, rain, shine, weekend, whatever. So that's my newest involvement, Brad. But probably the one is, so I'm in Maple River School District, so Good Thunder, Mapleton, Amboy area. But the Mankato area started a new ag program a number of years ago. They didn't have one. And so I got involved in that advisory committee. So you're advising the teacher on what programs and things to have. And you don't, you're not, your kids aren't going there. So you're like, do I donate my time to this and put my effort to this? But just this last year, I got an award from the Mankato FFA for helping make connections for the students on their projects when it comes to finding those technical expertise when it comes to your CDEs and those programs. So the reward comes, you just don't know when, and you can't be expecting it.
Back when I was in college, I went to SDSU, and I ran cross country in high school, and I just wanted to kind of keep running a little bit throughout college. And my first week of freshman year, I got hooked up with somebody who said that they were in the running club. Never heard of a running club, didn't know what it was. But I said, sure, I'll start running with you. And then they said, hey, we actually need somebody to go to this meeting in a week from now. None of us can make it. Can you show up? All you have to go is say yes. I said, sure, yep, I'll go to the meeting. I get there, it's the whole SDSU Student Association, and we're actually becoming a real club that day, and they want to know why I should be there, and the president of the Student Association is asking why I'm qualified to be there and why we want to become a club. And I said, I'm just a freshman, I have no idea. But it really put me in there, and a year later I became the president of the running club, and I met a lot of different people. Some of my best friends are from college, are from that club. And the number one question on my resume going to any job interview is, what is the SDSU running club? Why is this a thing? And really, it's those things that set you apart from everybody else that has the same things on their resume. It really benefits you being able to set yourself apart, saying, hey, yeah, I just went and started this organization, and I became a leader because of it. And so those small things that you don't think are going to be an impact, those can really make a big difference.
For me, I remember exactly the scenario. We had been asked to join Lyon County Farm Bureau, and we turned it down and said, nah, we didn't know anything about it. And then a few years later, our neighbor, Tim Lawaji, came around with our then area program director, who happened to be Brad Finstead, and he talked Jonathan and I into joining Farm Bureau, and we did. And we were still eligible for the Young Farmer and Rancher programs, and immediately got involved. And we were able to take a trip to Washington, D.C. with the Young Farmer and Rancher program because we competed in the Achievement Award. The couple funny things about that is I was terrified of flying. I'd never flown on a plane, so we drove out to D.C. that first time. If you need to, plane's grounded, call me, I know the route. But that's kind of where my whole leadership light bulb went off. I try to project that I'm a patient person, but I'm not. And I was annoyed because it was a Young Farmer and Rancher trip, and there were just a lot of new people that had never been to DC before, afraid to walk into the door of the congressperson that we were visiting. And I knew we had a timeline. Our procedure was we'd go in, we'd line up, we'd have a photo, then we'd have our meeting and talk about our points. And it was Congressman Peterson's office, and his was not the first office of the day, but at this point I was annoyed. So I just walked right in, and I got to spend some one-on-one time with the congressman and introduce myself and tell him where we live and that I was a constituent. And I had this nice conversation while everybody else is finally coming in the door and lining up for the photo. And I started doing that in every office. And that is kind of where that light bulb went off, that sometimes all it takes is to be bold enough to take that first step. And now I serve as vice president of the Minnesota Farm Bureau. So there's a lot of steps in between, but and we are far from being eligible for Young Farmer and Rancher programs anymore. So, but it just takes somebody being persistent. It takes it takes saying yes. It takes being bold. Even if you think it's going to be a long time commitment or you don't know how you fit in, sometimes that is where you find your voice and you find where you can do good for others and find that fulfilling thing to do. So thank you for that question, Brad. Okay, do we have one more? Awesome.
Hi, Jerry Tolan with SMSU, our Agriculture, Culinology, and Hospitality Management Program, Farm to Fork. So I would just want to put a plug in, for what I call hands-on learning and internships. I think if a student going through a program has an internship, and maybe they have one here in Southwest Minnesota, if some businesses think about maybe we should be sponsoring those things. If that student has a great experience, learns lots of things, and really learns to love the community, that's going to bring in migration. So I guess, and I think about the community and technical colleges as well as SMSU. I mean, all of those programs have internships as part of getting their degree, and I'm just more or less put a plug in. If you put that in a little idea in your head, said maybe I could sponsor an intern next summer or something like that, because that's going to help. I think the vibrancy of our community, and of course, the students really add to their education that way. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So we have time to do a quick remind us of your websites and give us a plug on your organizations, whether how to join, become a farm business management student or whatever. Jump in and share your last thoughts.
Okay, before I give those, I do kind of want to respond as comment question in the regards of that's one of the sections of the State of Ag report is talking about internships. We all kind of know if you're an agronomy student or a diesel tech at one of our community colleges, there's 2 businesses lined up for every one. And so that internship is the opposite of we need students into the program to get more. But there's a lot of students that don't get internships, and all of your businesses need more than just those few technical skills. And so there's so many small businesses or medium-sized businesses that have all kinds of reasonings why they don't do an internship. Versus if you get a little bit to the larger organizations, they all have internships. And so we have a whole section on here about the responses to that. And it's really interesting to see what the challenges are. The smaller businesses will say it's too much cost, too much time, resources. The larger businesses will strictly just say, hey, we're not getting the applications. And so I do really believe that internships is a long-term success of our region. They might not stay at your company, but what if you get somebody from a different company that got that hands-on experience, and what if they got the person that you had? It's still a win if you kept them in the region. If you don't ever give the opportunity for these folks to see underneath the hood of your business, it's easy for them to say, I don't see opportunity here, I must need to go to whatever, the Twin Cities. And so internships is a key component, so I'm glad you brought that up in a comment form, but I like it anyway. So if you go to the full report, you can read more details on that. Closing comment, thanks for being here. We try to be a resource with the State of Ag report, but we also try to be a resource if you're growing your business and need, what's that next direction to go, or if you're a startup business with a new idea and trying to figure out how to get going and over some of those challenges. That's kind of what Green Seam is about and does. But appreciate Brad and your team taking the efforts and the resources each year to say, let's focus on this industry that has the most ripple effect in the community and economy. Every economy starts with natural resources, the first sector economy, and the first sector of any economy has the most ripple effect. So really appreciate you guys calling Food and Ag out each year. Thank you, Brad and Carolyn.
Yeah, for our annual report, it's easiest just to Google Minnesota FBM annual report. It should come up. If not, you can reach out to me or any other farm business management instructor, and we'd be happy to share it with you. You're probably going to want to reach out to one of us because we can actually go through what it all is. If you just look at the annual report online, there's a lot of pages, and you're gonna spend a lot of time looking through all of that. But also, I encourage you, if you know a farmer that seems like they're struggling, or if you are a farmer yourself, reach out to a farm business management instructor. We can help you get in a better spot financially, and that can ease a lot of the stress of farming.
And I'll say our website is ruralmn.org. And if people ever ask you, policymakers at any level ask you, why do we need rural research? And it's because urban solutions are inefficient for rural areas. They're not bad, they're different. It looks different out here. And so I always have to remind people that, and that's where our organization comes in, bringing that rural perspective and that rural lens. Healthcare in Robbinsdale looks really different than healthcare in Marshall. And we talk about that why. There's no good or bad, it's just the policy is different and trying to find that nuance. So make sure to check out our website. We're also on all social media, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that fun jazz.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of our panelists today and for all of you who took the time out of your day to attend this event. Feel free to stick around and network if you'd like. I know some people have to get back to your real jobs. But thank you also once again to all of the sponsors that are on the melted banner behind us, but you had a chance to look at that while you were sitting there. And then before we close, let's wish Brad a very happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Brad.
And thank you to Brad and his staff for all of the work to put on this event, for coordinating the panelists, and for keeping agriculture as an important part of the Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce. So thank you for being here today.